and it is going to culminate in a Pro Tour victory off of this combo deck as he attacks for the full amount. A block from Benton, and Reed Duke is your Pro Tour Phyrexia champion.
And just like that, Reed Duke became the first person to win a Magic the Gathering Pro Tour since late 2018, when they started calling them Mythic Championships. The MPL was founded, and the rails kind of fell off on organized play in Magic. But was the return of the Pro Tour a success? In this video, I'm going to be answering that question and looking at it from the perspective of Wizards of the Coast, the viewers, and the players who participated. First off, I want to say that a success criteria for all of the groups was that high-level gameplay is important, and it's important to Wizards of the Coast because they want to showcase Magic the Gathering at its finest. The viewers want to witness the best players in the world showing off their best efforts at winning, and the players want to participate in the pinnacle of competition in this game. And it's safe to say that the best in the world showed up and they delivered a great performance. We saw Hall of Famers like Gabriel Nassif, Luis Scott Vargas, and Shota Yasuoka, and we also saw plenty of other players who might not be as famous, but that certainly put in the effort to get good at the decks they were playing and bring us a good show. And I definitely think that it delivered on the gameplay aspect. Now we'll look at it from Wizards of the Coast's perspective. They want to make sure that there's good viewership for the event, which demonstrates interest from people in the community, and they want there to be good storylines that they can use to promote the game to new players or get newer players more interested in potentially building competitive decks and things like that. First up, I'll look at the viewership and compare it to other events. And it's very cool to see that the Pro Tour that they held had more views than the World Championship that they had in late 2022, which is a really encouraging sign for the Pro Tour because they clearly put a lot of effort into it, and it's nice to see that paper play gets good viewership. It is worth noting, though, that when we compare it to previous Pro Tours, this one being Pro Tour Aether Revolt from 2017, it does have slightly lower viewership, maybe because there's not as established of an audience yet, or maybe because they're still working out the kinks, but that's definitely something to keep in mind. And if we compare it to the last Pro Tour, the one that they held in late 2018, we see that the viewership for the last Pro Tour was much higher. And that could just have been because it was the last Pro Tour, people were very interested in that, but it's also worth keeping in mind that the viewership definitely wasn't as high as we have seen at previous Pro Tours. Now, in terms of good storylines, I think that the premier storyline was that the finals matchup was between Reed Duke, who is a Hall of Famer, a pillar of the Magic the Gathering community, and he was playing against Benton Madsen, who was playing in his first ever Pro Tour. He had qualified for the Pro Tour, playing MTG Arena on his phone, and that's really just an incredible storyline that the people doing coverage were talking about throughout the entire weekend, and that everyone really could get behind and kind of enjoy. And so I think that that was a really good storyline to come out of the Pro Tour, and I would call that a success for Wizards of the Coast. Next, we're going to look at the success criteria for the viewers. They want to make sure that there are clear board states when they're watching, that there's great commentary to explain what's going on, and that there is non-stop action without tons of breaks between the games. First up, with regards to clear board states, this is a picture that I took while I was watching the event, and while it is generally pretty clear, there are definitely some flaws, which I'll address in a moment. But before that, I want to highlight a very important feature, and that is that they added the ability to click on an extension while you're watching live on Twitch, which can show you the deck lists, which really helps you just jump into the action and kind of really quickly figure out what's going on. And I think that that's a really nice feature that they added, and so I wanted to give them kudos for that. The broadcast is also just generally pretty sound. You can kind of tell what's going on, but I did want to point out some flaws because I think that there is room for improvement, and so I just wanted to highlight that. For starters, if we're just looking at this board state, there's plenty of room that just is completely useless off to the side. It's also interesting because the life totals are put in a way that is not very intuitive to read. Usually you'd want to see those life totals put in a spot where you can easily compare them, where it's not really easy to look at them both at the same time. There's also the companion for Marcio Carvalho kind of hanging out here, and it looks kind of similar positioning to where the other cards are that are in play. And then there's these tokens hanging out, and it's also kind of unclear whether or not they're in play. Looking at a broadcast from a random Grand Prix that I found that I was just scrolling through, you can see that the broadcast is significantly different. It's not only just kind of more central in terms of the players are on either side instead of top and bottom, but you can see that the life totals are clearly positioned right next to each other, and it's really kind of easy to see kind of who's winning from that perspective. The blank space that is found on this board is off to the sides and kind of allows you to sometimes get a glimpse of the player's hands, which is much nicer than having the blank space be above and below the board where you don't actually have any action going on. Moving on to another picture here, just kind of to demonstrate similar things, we can see that there's just plenty of space that just isn't used, and that the companion is once again hanging out in an ambiguous location. I think that they should just have zones where they put the cards, and that would make it much clearer to figure out what's going on. Where if there was a companion zone where the companions would always hang out, that would be much better for the broadcast. If we look at one final thing here, I noticed this while I was watching a game, that Jacantha wasn't in play, but this Blood Soak token certainly was, and having them overlap was definitely a real problem, especially because the other token was over here by the rest of the board state, and then of course there's still this empty space on the sides. If we compare this to a Pro Tour from 2016, where Reed Duke is playing against Luis Scott Vargas, you can see that the board state is very clear in the upper left. We have the section on the right, which is where they put the card images, and then we see the life totals are once again right next to each other. We can see the player records and things like that. It just feels like a very clean overlay, and comparing it to the other one, I think that this one's just a little bit nicer, but that could also just be because I'm used to it, so I'm interested to hear what you think of that as well. I also wish they had used the player cams a little bit more. It's nice to see the players when they're shuffling like this, and while they did have the player cams in the lower corners, it's nice to actually just see the players playing the game, or even when they're making a big decision, just like looking at the player and their emotion really makes the event come to life. And so they did that for some of the bigger games, like in the finals, they would do that, but I wish they did that a little bit more during the games as well. Having the player cams in the lower corner just isn't quite the same. I've talked a lot about the viewership experience, but it overall was a really good one, and I will say that that was in large part due to the coverage team, which did a fantastic job. Marshall Sutcliffe and Paul Cheon were my favorite duo to have in the booth. They commentated during the drafts, they commentated during the finals, and it was overall a great team, and everyone did a great job. I also will say, in terms of the non-stop action criteria I mentioned, they did a fantastic job. And this was like the highest you would ever see the timer, less than 2 minutes. Just let 2-minute break to get things set up and then move on to the next segment. It's something that the Pro Tour has been praised for this time around, and it's something they did a really good job on, so I wanted to shout them out for that as well. Moving on to the player success criteria. This is the category that I think is pretty interesting, because while Wizards of the Coast is funding the event and the viewers are the ones that kind of determine its success, having players that want to play in the event is incredibly important. And I think to have that, you need to have good prize support, which incentivizes players to want to compete in these events and to try their hardest. And you also need to have a Pro Tour feeling. A lot of players that have been in previous Pro Tours, or who have always wanted to play in the Pro Tour, have this sort of vision in their head of what the Pro Tour is like. And so trying to make sure that it feels like a big event, that it feels like a monumental occurrence, that achievement to get to play in that's something that you really want to be keeping your eye out for. So first of all, with regards to prize support, this is the official funding. So first place got $50,000, and it's worth noting that $50,000 as first place is the same prize that they gave at the last Pro Tour. However, the overall prize fund of $500,000 is actually double what they gave at the last in-person Pro Tour. Second place gets substantially more money, and then they just give more prize money throughout the structure. So even though first place prize is the same, the prize support since the last Pro Tour in late 2018 has doubled, though $500,000 is relatively similar to other prize funds they've been using for recent tournaments. The last World Championship actually had a $250,000 prize fund, but a lot of the recent tournaments have had slightly bigger ones at $450,000 or things like that. But yeah, the prize support was definitely present, and I think that that was a really nice feature of this Pro Tour. And then with regards to Pro Tour feeling, I will say that while I didn't play in the Pro Tour, I think that while I was watching it, it certainly felt like a Pro Tour, and I think that from what I've heard from some of the players, they felt like it was like a Pro Tour too. I think bringing back draft and having that be a key piece of the Pro Tour, the fact that they did 2 drafts and that they broadcast the drafts and brought back high-level limited, is an important part of that Pro Tour feeling, because having to master multiple formats has always been kind of an aspect of the Pro Tour when they were doing draft format and then whatever constructed format they ended up doing. And so I think that that is a key feature of the Pro Tour, at least when they were doing the Pro Tours from like 2015 to 2018 when they stopped them or whatever it was. They used to have Pro Tours that were just limited or just constructed, but I think that the fact that the Pro Tour has high-level limited is a big factor in giving that Pro Tour feeling. And also just if it feels like a Pro Tour from a viewer's perspective, it's likely to feel like a Pro Tour from the player's perspective as well. But it's obviously impossible to know without actually playing, but from hearing things and from kind of watching it and things like that, it felt like they got that Pro Tour feeling pretty close. Anyway, was the Pro Tour a success? only time will tell, and we'll have to see how they improve things going forward with the Pro Tours. My initial inclination is that it was a success. I think they did a good job with it. Even though the viewership wasn't insanely high, they did peak at about 29,000 viewers at the Pro Tour Top 8 when Reed Duke got the win, which I think was pretty successful for a format that they haven't really pulled out of the bag for a while. And so I think that they did a good job with it, and I think it was a success. But I'm interested to hear what you my voice lasted the entire video and then crashed and burned in the final 5 seconds, but I'm interested to hear what you thought of the Pro Tour. Let me know down in the comment section down below, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, let me know as well. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did make it all the way to the end of the video, leave hashtag Pro Tour in the comment section down below, and I'll talk to you next time.